This is Seventh Generation Warfare. I am your current host, John Nelson. In this episode, we will be taking an introductory look into Sixth Generation Warfare. So, why are we talking about Sixth Generation Warfare if this channel is called Seventh Generation War? Well, before we get into that, this one might be a little dry again. I am reading off a script, so just keep that in mind. Hopefully, you can get some good tidbits out of this, but if I stutter at all, I'm reading from a script. All right, so why are we talking about sixth generation warfare? We know that seventh generation warfare is, quote, nonviolent warfare, ensuring that our descendants control their own will, end quote. And we've discussed briefly that some of the tactics, techniques, and procedures, or TTPs, thereof. But any seventh generation warfare we fight is only going to be good as we ourselves are and our descendants as individuals are, what capacities we have for waging that. So in order to maximize our own efficiency in seventh generation warfare, we must seek to maximize our own individual wills as well. If you watched my first video titled "What is seventh generation warfare?" then you would already know that sixth generation warfare I defined as, quote, nonviolent warfare for control over one's own will, end quote. And that was in response because fifth generation warfare is all this propaganda and a war over the hearts and the minds of the population. So sixth generation warfare is about the war within oneself over one's own mind, harnessing one's own will, and not giving in to the pressures and influences of society or other people. So I hope this is all starting to make sense, why sixth generation warfare is a necessary component and a big component of seventh generation warfare. The goal is to get to a place individually that you can wage a seventh generation warfare, that you can get beyond yourself and beyond what your own will. It's always your will. Whatever you do is always your will. But get beyond your own immediate desires and pursue the securing the will for your descendants. If that makes sense. So, with sixth generation warfare, I want to first take a look at why we might not control our own wills. I think the most clear example I could give of this would be somebody under the influence of drugs. And let's not even take it to the extreme of somebody on bath salts, eating somebody's face off or something crazy like that. But just perhaps you yourself have gotten too intoxicated off alcohol before and woke up the next day, to embarrassing stories being told about you and your actions, things that you would have never done if you're sober. If it happened to you or happened to somebody close enough to you, then you can clearly understand that even alcohol has removed your will or can remove the will of others. So now that we understand that removal or superseding of our will is possible under influence of drugs, let's take a look at some other ways that this could happen. I think a big one is childhood trauma. This I think should be obvious, but I don't think it is as obvious as I think it is, that people don't necessarily go back into their past and reflect on the conditions under which they were raised. The childhood trauma could be a dramatic event, such as a physical abuse or something like that, or it could be as minor as overbearing parents who are, inconsiderate to the children's will. If parents are always making decisions for the kids and the kids don't have a say in what happens in their own life, that's going to diminish their own capacity to exercise their will. And that will carry on to later in life until they are aware of it and put a stop to it. Our wills are intimately intertwined with that of our childhood caregivers, primarily our parents. This is most obviously seen by how attached emotionally, like say a breastfed baby is to their mother, since as a child, our mere survival is dependent on the approval of our parents. The lengths that the lengths we would go to and the thoughts we'll convince ourselves of in order to survive childhood environment cannot be underestimated. So it's not just about a breastfed baby. It's about all throughout your childhood. You need the approval of your parents. Your survival is completely dependent on your parents, and because of that, most people are going to do whatever they can to stay in the good graces of the parents. Some children do try to run away. It's typically short lived. They get down the block and realize I don't know what I'm doing, so they turn around and go back into the hellish household, which is kind of sad if that's the environment that the kids are living in. Another culprit that affects our will, getting out of childhood and trauma, another culprit that could affect our will is fifth generation warfare, as I mentioned above. This is basically propaganda. Both foreign nations and local governments, big businesses, and powerful people everywhere put immense effort and resources into convincing us what we want and don't want. For instance, your government wants to convince you to pick up a rifle and go die in a foreign country. Foreign countries spend money in social media and internet engineering to make populations docile and weak. I personally think that porn is one of these weapons that might have its funding coming from other countries. Big corporations will use any marketing scheme they can conceive of to get you to convince to buy their product. You can think of the trope would be just that there's always attractive women on the billboards. Why? I mean, it's not a reflective of the average consumer of the product, but attracted people stimulate the mind in a different way and make you more receptive to the marketing. So if you're not discerning to all the schemes of the big corporations and the governments, etc., you're likely to fall victim to it. And by falling victim to it, you're now exercising the will of others. It's no longer your will. If you were stopping and thinking about it and you say, no, I don't need to go and buy that item, or no, this war doesn't really sit right with me, I don't actually want to support it, then that would be your actual will coming through. So, and because of this, those same people tend to be okay and promote indulging in vices and addictive behavior because it makes you easier to control. We talked about porn making people, particularly men, docile, but it's really any kind of addictive behavior. Here are some examples. And not all these are directly tied to somebody consciously trying to do these things to you, but these are addictive behaviors that you yourself could be beholden to. Food. If you get hangry, just because you haven't eaten in a couple hours, yeah, food is a necessity. You do need food to survive, to live, but you can go a couple days without food and it shouldn't affect your temperament too much. If it is affecting your temperament, it's something to work on. Having low blood pressure kind of goes in with that same thing. Gluttony, overindulgence of food, even eating 3 square meals a day. All these things are ways that food is a controlling object. Drugs, obviously the illicit drugs, but pot, alcohol, and even coffee. There's plenty of professional people who talk so so fondly of their daily cup or four of coffee, but that's an addiction. And what kind of mood would they be in if they didn't have that? They are dependent on exterior stimulus for the condition of life that they want. You can be addicted to cortisol, getting outraged at current events or feeling helplessness, watching like sports or watching your sport team lose, or the big one is watching your politically motivated news channel and getting outraged at what the politicians on the other side of the aisle did. Um, it doesn't affect you, and so I think you're probably addicted to the cortisol. Um, you can be addicted to the internet, social media, even the pursuit of knowledge. This is something that I fall for a lot. Is I'll convince myself that the YouTube videos I'm watching or the podcasts I'm listening to are educational, and therefore it's good. But sometimes, if I'm honest about it, I'm really just looking to escape my own thoughts. So if you're looking to escape your own thoughts by going on the internet, you might have a problem. I speak from experience on that one. Financial, needing to find easy breaks. The person who plays the lottery, thinking they can win it big, or watches the stock, crypto, or precious metal markets and are hoping that they'll go to the moon. There's an addiction there. So those are just a few. The list goes on and on. The point being is that if you're addicted, you are easily controlled, and you're not in the best position to manifest your own will because you're worried about that next fix, getting that thing that will bring you back to a state of comfort. Speaking about state of comfort, I realized I was talking about watching YouTube videos and stuff. I have this tablet. I discovered several months back that I was carrying around that tablet in the same manner I would carry around my blankie when I was 3 years old. And so I jokingly started calling my tablet my blankie. And essentially, I think it was serving the same purpose of comfort. I told that to somebody, and they told me how they quit smoking, and they realized when they were puffing on a cigarette that it was very much the same gesture as sucking on their mother's tit when they were a baby. So they were getting that same level of comfort as a baby breastfeeding was the same comfort they were getting from puffing on a cigarette. So these things from our childhood can manifest in completely different ways when we're much older. So just something to think about. Another way that we might not be in control of our will is if we seek collective identity. This is similar to fifth generation warfare in that it's political in nature. Politics just being, people trying to get their wills and opinions shared and adopted. But there is no real central authority to identity, right? You identify as a white male or something, which I don't. I don't care about identity. I am who I am, and that's all that I am. But then you will start to manifest the things that identity is supposed to have. So if you identify with a collective identity, then you'll be more easily persuaded, manipulated into ignoring your own will for that of the collective. This is also why collective or identity politics is so useful to the power structure. You get people to think I am X, and people who are X do Y, therefore I should do Y also. It is not a certainty that you will ignore your will for the will of the collective, but you have to be aware that it's a risk before you stand any chance in fighting against it. And to be clear, there is no collective will. That's an illusion in our own minds. There's the wills of individuals, and there's you can say there is a collective insofar as there's people, identifying with a common shared thing, and them bringing their individual wills. You can notice some tendencies of the wills of those people, but there is no collective will. uh, Last way I want to touch on people not being in control of their will is fear. We talked, I guess, a little bit about it with cortisol, but when you're in a state of fear, your primary concern is to find stability or comfort or that easy feeling again. People who are fearful, it could come from the aforementioned childhood trauma. It could also be that they're addicted to the behavior of fear. It could also be that powerful interests are paying lots of money to broadcast messages of fear. Think, a couple years back, March 2020. But when you're in a state of fear, you are moldable and able to be manipulated. And you will forego your long-term vision, your long-term will, in order to regain that current comfort. Also, once you're to the other side, or even when you're in the fear, conveniently enough, it's a natural human process to start to make up justifications for one's own actions, why they're afraid or why they had to do certain thing when they were afraid. So, the common phrase of, well, I had to do X because of Y. Well, if it's against your will, you don't have to do anything. Period. The end. So that's what living in free will is about. And I've heard a lot of that this decade already, and I try not. If I do something against my will, I try my best not to lie about it. Try not to turn it into a virtue. That's something that happens too. Well, I previously thought this was bad, but then I was put in a corner and I did it. So instead of admitting that I'm bad, I'm just going to pretend that it was good all along. And then they convince themselves of it, and it takes a lot more to come back from that. Instead of saying, yeah, it's not good, I was put in a tight position, and I chose to forego my will for the easy comfort. That will do far less damage to your will. You'll be able to recover from that far quicker. All right, so moving on. What is your will, or what are wills in general? Maybe this should have gone earlier, but anyways, it didn't. If I told you what your will was or what a will is in general, then it would not be yours. So it'd be contradictory for me to tell you what your will is. You need to figure that out for yourself. Everything I have said and will say on this channel ever is to stir your own thoughts, not to tell you what to think. So I hope that's clear. However, I would define my will as being a mixture of my conscience. Always let your conscience be your guide, your inner voice telling you right and wrong. A mixture of my conscience, my desires, and my abilities. My conscience is a critical component because if you don't listen to it, while you may be able to obtain your desires, they will not bring you joy. Your conscience is what brings you the joy, listening to your conscience. So you can still get the other components. You can still achieve your desires, but it won't have the effective outcome that you think it will. Your desires are an important aspect because that's what you're striving for. Your will needs a goal. Your desires, directed by your conscience, are the goal, right? And then lastly, your abilities need to be considered because one's will needs to be achievable. If it's not achievable, then it's a dream, or it's make believe, or it's somebody else's will. If it's not realistic to you, it doesn't belong to you. It's not yours. I hope that makes sense. There's probably a better, more elegant way to say it, but I don't have those words at this time. Maybe after a couple of years of doing this channel. So, how to fight a sixth generation warfare? Again, you'll need to determine that for yourself. I do know that it's, broadly speaking, it's a two-front war, material and spiritual. Spiritually, and knowing what threatens your will and what does not, knowing when it is taking hold within you, that which threatened your will, knowing when somebody else's will or a will that isn't yours is taking hold within you, and how to let it go, knowing how to recognize others exerting their will or being programmed to exert the will of others, knowing how to avoid others before they threaten your will. And when I speak of others, it can be an individual or a group of people or a concept. I think it's perfectly okay to speak in terms of, we're talking spiritual here, angels, demons, demonic possession. If that's the framework that works for you to get your thoughts about whose will it is, maybe it's Lucifer's or maybe it's God's will. If that's the framework that is useful, then by all means use it. And then the second component would be the second front of this war would be material, because we are material creatures. We don't just live in the abstract of our minds. We have material needs, and those material needs can easily bend us to the will of others. It is our flesh and blood is our critical vulnerability. That, if you remember back to Marine Corps Doctrinal Publication 1, Warfighting, critical vulnerability is that which the enemy's weakness that bends their will to yours. So our flesh and blood is our critical vulnerability. So materially, you need to be sure that you can acquire the resources, as much resources as you need to live a fulfilling life. You don't need a Maserati, but to live a fulfilling life and not confuse material wants with material needs. Also, in being able to either help others acquire the resources that they require, so that they don't get desperate, because desperate people do desperate things. So either helping people acquire the resources that they need, or knowing when to avoid them if they are on a violent path for resource acquisition. I hope that makes sense. But that doesn't say anything about practical steps of what your sixth generation warfare should look like. I don't have much more to tell you at this time. Don't lie to yourself. Search your soul. And prove yourself any way you can. I really look into your own psychology. Really examine your childhood. Get rid of any kind of addictive behavior. Get rid of any... try to minimize your dependencies on others. A lot of the stuff I talk about in Ready Side Up, which I have not actually made a video about yet, but you can go see over on Facebook, Ready Side Up, Not Quite Prepping, Survival, or Homesteading. A lot of the stuff I talk about over there is about building readiness, resiliency, and self-reliance. So if you can get those things in place, you'll be a lot better off in securing your own will, and not having to listen and act on the will of others. Before we go, there is one more component to sixth generation warfare, and that is how to apply it to the seventh generation war. And that is, we need to try to instill the values of self-betterment in our children. Obviously, because seventh generation warfare is about securing the will for our children. So we need to get them to be able to fight their own sixth generation war as well. The sooner we can instill confidence in our children, the better. If they know that they can solve any problem that comes their way, they will have an easy time pursuing their will. They also need to feel worthy of having a will in the first place. They need to feel belonging and self-worth. As far as self-betterment, demonstrating self-betterment to them will help them learn the skill and admit when you're wrong and exhibit growth for them to see. And I think that's probably one of the most crucial things is being able to be wrong in front of your children and demonstrating growth out of that inferior position. So, if you have any wisdom to share in regards to what sixth generation warfare or self-betterment in general, if you don't like the warfare terminology, just think of sixth generation warfare as self-betterment. If you have any wisdom in regards to it, I would enjoy having you on to discuss, or even if you leave it in the comments, we can all take a look. Please like and subscribe to the channel. We got lots more coming in this war. Hopefully generations worth of content coming in this war. This is 7th Generation Warfare. I am your current host, John Nelson, and have a good night.